Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 25 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 6 and the rest of the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. The Cap is still on after his Jets dropped another one. My Seahawks stink. There's a lot of fantasy football to talk about. I might go 4-0 for the first time this season in my leagues. I crushed it in a couple of them. This is actually one of my better fantasy weeks, and pleasantly surprised because after Thursday night, after I had Mike Evans dropping 30 on me, and I think I faced maybe Drake London in a league or something, I wasn't looking too good. How'd your week go? Besides the Jets, because you know what, I know I'm making a little bit of digs, but my Seahawks stink. It's not a Seahawks show, but they stink. And USC stinks too. So I had a miserable sports weekend besides my fantasy teams.
I will say my fantasy teams played really well this week, and I managed to lose in a lot of leagues. I had it was at one point during I think it was around the 4:00 slate where the projections in my games, I was projected to score a total of 790 points across 5 leagues. That's about an average. That's over 150 points in each per team. Most of them are 2 flex. One of them's 3 receiver, 2 flex. One of them's 1 flex. 2 receiver. So it was supposed to be a very, very good fantasy week, and I think I'm going to wind up going 2-3, maybe 1-4 on the week. I think I had one team. Weeks. Yeah, I mean, I had one team that went for like 180. I had another team that went for like 175. One of those is losing, one of them is winning, and then the other ones are all like 140 to 150 and losses. One bad week.
Okay. I mean, I'm looking at here. My dynasty league is going to be a tight one with our buddies Chris and Liam from grade school. They split a team in our dynasty. It's going to be a close one. I'm projected to have 150 and win 153. In another league, I'm only projected I think 100. But it's a very low scoring, low roster league. I have 178, and then in our league, I'm projected 192. It's one of the highest point totals, probably somewhere in the top 10, 15 in our 9 years of our league. And it's against my buddy Jared, who's on Slaughter Watch this week. You got slaughtered, buddy. Slaughter Watch, an inside joke that we have from 10 years ago. But anyway, this is the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. If it's your first time listening or joining our show, thank you so much, especially if you joined us for a Sunday morning live show for Week 5. We always have a lot of fun with those. So every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, you get a live show from us to prepare that week. And then during the week, you get 2 shows. This show that gives you a weekly recap of our top 5 takeaways, plus the waiver wire segment to kick things off. And then our Friday show is our all boom and all bust teams. Programming note. I'm in Florida. Hurricane. Very, very bad. Let's hope that nothing's ruined and I could actually record. Anyway, figured I'd give a program.
Yeah, just in case.
Just in case. Since I will not be recording from a Starbucks. I don't think I could do that. All right. Waiver wire Week 6.
Yeah, going into Week 6. Yep.
Going into Week 6. Okay. For quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is owned 40, and these percentages, by the way, are based off of ESPN. Quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins is owned in 45% of leagues. Caleb Williams owned in 44% of leagues. Bo Nix owned in 8% of leagues. Trevor Lawrence owned in 33% of leagues. Nick, who are you liking for next week, week after? Who are you liking?
I mean, if you're going season long, I'm going to lean on Caleb Williams. I think he's looked much better every single week of the season. I know they had a very easy matchup, but their schedule is built for easy matchups and shootouts, which I like. And then, I mean, how could you ignore Kirk Cousins after a 500-yard massive game on a loaded offense? I mean,
Matt Ryan night, breaking Matt Ryan's record. What a kick in the face.
Yeah, that was a little disrespectful, Kirk. But Kirk goes up against Carolina, who is one of the worst defenses in football. So I would love to stream Kirk Cousins if you have one of the quarterbacks on bye next week. And the bye next
Patrick
week,
Mahomes,
Stafford,
Darnold.
Miami quarterback, and then Sam Darnold. So a few starters in there for sure.
You're probably only looking for a backup for Mahomes, but I'm cool with picking up Kirk. If you need somebody season long or just next week. We can move on at this point. Okay, running backs. Rico Dowdle owned in 40% of leagues. I think he had a pretty solid night last night. Was it 23, 24 points or something? Tank Bigsby, and Nick is a big Tank guy. And Roshan Johnson owned. So Tank and Roshan are both owned in 10% of leagues. Dowdle in 40%. I think we have a Dowdle in our last episode, or maybe back-to-back weeks at this point. He's probably not available in your competitive leagues, but if he is available, he really should be rostered unless you're in like an 8-man league.
100%. He had his best game of the year, 20 carries, 4.4 yards per carry. So very, very good performance from Dowdle. I definitely want him. If he's not available, I'd be in on Tank Bigsby. I have been for years, but he actually has the highest yards per carry of any running back in the NFL up to this point of the season. I imagine there's got to be some minimum carries for that number, because there's definitely some guys that get the one rush for 30 yards or whatever. But that's a great stat for him. Roshan's getting all the goal line work, and if this team keeps the touchdowns up, he will be a flex option. But for me, it's Dowdle, then Bigsby, then Roshan. I think that order makes a ton of sense.
Okay. Wide receivers, you Darius Slayton with the Giants, owned in 5% of leagues, carved up that horrendous Seahawks defense. Alec Pierce owned in 15% of leagues. Jalen Tolbert owned in 7%. Shout out to Nick, who did tell you guys 2 weeks ago to go pick up Jalen Tolbert on our Friday show with our deep dive into the waiver wire. I listened to Nick. I played Jalen Tolbert, I think, in our league. So thanks to Nick for that one. Then Josh Downs in 35% of leagues. Who do you like, Nick, besides Jalen Tolbert, obviously?
Well, Tolbert's definitely my one. And then depending on how long they ride out Flacco, because that offense looks so much better without Richardson. I actually see Richardson getting dropped in a ton of leagues that I'm in. Just because, Flacco has looked better and Richardson hasn't been good for fantasy. He had a great week 1 and it's been a downhill climb. But if Joe Flacco gets in the game and he is the starting quarterback next week for weeks going on, Downs and Pierce have been good for fantasy. I would definitely lean Downs because his production looked better for a longer piece of the game. Pierce didn't have any points up until I think the end of the third or early fourth quarter, and then he put up 3 catches for 120 or 30 yards and a touchdown. But both of them are on the field. It's been Pittman and those two firmly getting all the snap share from the wide receiver room. It's been definitive, unlike some teams like the Packers who rotate in and out their receivers, or some of the other teams. There's a ton of them, but that's kind of been one of the 3 with defined roles. So I like Downs if you can't get Tolbert, but I'm not ready to trust Downs unless I know Flacco's in that.
So this did not make my top 5 takeaways, and I don't think it made Nick's top 5 either. So I actually had 8 takeaways that I had to narrow down, kind of hoping Nick would take 2 or 3 of them. But one of them that did not make my top 5 was that Flacco is an elite fantasy quarterback and is much better for that Colts offense.
Stat sheet stuffer, baby.
He's a stat sheet stuffer. The running backs looked good. I think Taylor would be better off with Flacco as well. Anyway. On to the tight ends. We have Brenton Strange for the Jaguars. There was a report on Evan Ingram earlier. I had a busy day. I missed it, but there was a report on Ingram earlier. I forget what it was, though. Tyler Conklin, who I think me and Nick both spoke about on our Sunday morning show, to go pick up Tyler Conklin and play. I played him in place of the Lions. Slipping my mind. Lions tight end that I drafted really high. Laporta. I played him over Laporta because Laporta's on bye. And then we have Charlie Kolar. And listen, I'm just saying, when there's a white dude on the Ravens who's kind of stocky and has an 8 on his jersey, I'm kind of celebrating the touchdown. And then it's not Mark Andrews. Yep. I'm just saying. I was not thrilled about it.
No, you shouldn't have been.
Kolar's owned in less than 1% of leagues, Strange 9%, and Conklin 37%. I would go attack Conklin because I think he is a good part of that offense. But what do you think?
I agree. I think he's the most clearly defined tight end of these 3 that will consistently be on the field. Most teams this year have been going like tight end by committee, and we usually hear that for running back. He's been one of the only guys that through 5 weeks has over a 90% snap share of all the tight ends in football. So he's consistently out on the field and he is consistently putting up points. So at this point, when he's got that he's getting a guaranteed target share. through 5 weeks. 2 or 3 of them were very good weeks for him. So I like him. It's not a high ceiling, but it's a safer floor than some of these other guys.
Yeah, and that Jets offense did look a little bit more improved. Not enough points were scored. They just couldn't kind of get the ball into the end zone a couple of those times. But it did look like Conklin was involved. I like him season long if they're not trading for Devontae Adams, and then if they're trading for Adams, you got to think Adams plus Garrett Wilson had a monster game. Hats off to him. And then also Lazard I think he had another double-digit point fantasy performance. So Conklin would probably end up being the odd man out. All right, I think Nick has a couple defenses here that you could stream for week 6. Since we're both streamers, who do you like? Off the top of my head, I do like the Falcons defense against the Panthers. I'm not sure if they were on your short list, but
yeah, they're on there. I don't have the percentages with me, but I'm gonna just give you some of the top, like the best matchups to play.
That's okay. I mean, we don't need percentages for these because every league is so different.
Yeah, it's so variant. Atlanta against Carolina. Nick mentioned that one. That's one of the top ones for sure, especially getting the extra rest. Houston against New England. That's a huge one.
It's a great one.
That's definitely one of the bigger ones. A sneaky one that I think will get ignored a lot and will be benched. New Orleans against Tampa. Baker and Mike Evans historically have struggled last year against them. I can take a look at the in-depth stats for the Sunday show, and I'll definitely have that for you guys then. But they do not play well against this team.
I feel like New Orleans in general has outplayed Tampa for years, even when Brady was there. I just feel like New Orleans has their number. They're one of those teams
for sure. And then probably the most available of any of the teams, it's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have been one of, if not the worst offense for fantasy football as of this point, and one of the worst offenses in football. So definitely take advantage of that. My only fear would be that we get Jameis Winston in that game. And if Winston comes in, that secondary might be cooked, but I like the Eagles coming off a rest. A lot of their guys are getting healthier. None of them had long-term injuries, but there was a lot of injuries to their front seven. Rookie secondary, you hope that after the bye week, some things get figured out and cleaned up.
Another one of my points that did not make it was that the Browns offense stinks. It's really bad. Okay. Speaking of our top 5 takeaways, here we go. Me and Nick each have 5 takeaways. They're completely different. They're our biggest fantasy football takeaways from week 5. It could be a takeaway from this week or one to affect the entire season. Nick, what do you got?
First, we're going to start it off. Before I get into the takeaways, let's just go real quick. My 5 takeaways, they kind of have a little bit of a theme here. It has to do with pre-draft notions, and it has to do with things that we said, whether it was be patient, use this draft strategy. Like, that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about this week, because now we're 5 weeks in. What you knew pre-draft and what you knew during the draft, like, now you have the proof of concept and the evidence that supports it. So the first one is you wanted to be patient on rookies, but most importantly, and we're going to focus on this guy, Caleb Williams. He was drafted in over 90% of leagues. We mentioned him on the waiver wire, owned in only 44% of leagues. Best game yet of his career. Passer rating going up every single week. And he's been great for the last few weeks for fantasy. If you remove the first game of his career, he's on pace for 4,200 yards, 22 touchdowns, 66 completion percentage. If you remove the first 2 games of his career, he's averaging 292 yards per game, 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions as a TD to interception ratio. This week, QB6, and he has one of the easiest schedules remaining, and it's going to have some of the highest over-unders. All the division matchups are like week 9 or week 10 on, and the next few defenses, like he gets Jacksonville this week. That's a huge one, and we really like those kinds of matchups. Shane Waldron, Nick's former offensive coordinator, they brought him in to figure out this offense, and Caleb Williams, and he's starting to do a better job with it. One of the concerns last year for the Bears and for the Seahawks, I always mention it, the Seahawks last year ran the least amount of plays per game as any team. It's why they struggled for fantasy, as good as some of the players would stick out. This offense is running the 5th most plays per game, and that is great for fantasy football numbers, and it's getting even better. Now you look at the team around him. DJ Moore, best game with Caleb Williams this past week, 2 touchdowns, over 20 points in his revenge game. DeAndre Swift had a great game. Keenan Allen, he's still trying to recover from the injury. Dunze's out there, but we're watching them clean up and get better. They're on the up and up, and I really like Caleb Williams. This upcoming week, I like him as a reliable fantasy option, and I think it's time for him to stay on your roster. I know a lot of people cut ties with him very early, especially seeing Jaden Daniels succeed so much, but he is on the upward trajectory, and I definitely want to roster him if he's on your waiver wire.
So my kind of theme is just offenses and defenses with one other take. And I want to premise this to you guys that our takes are not numbered 1 to 5. They're just 5 takes. So
Yeah.
So my take is actually with the Bears. That's the Bears D is legit. And I've kind of been screaming that for a couple weeks now. I told you guys to bust CJ Stroud week 2. He had 14.3 fantasy points, was the quarterback 16. So I'm going to run through the weeks here. Week 1, and I only have the notable players that stunk up the joint. So week 1, they had the Titans. Tony Pollard had a fine game. The Bears defense actually is not good against running backs, but they're better against receivers and quarterbacks. So week 1, Calvin Ridley held to 8 points. Week 2, CJ Stroud was held to 14.3 and Stephon Diggs was held to 7.1. Nico Collins had a great game. But Nico's awesome. This he is legit. Nico is the one over there. So I'm okay with him getting his. Week 3, Anthony Richardson, I've been dunking on forever, 7.1. Michael Pittman, 7.6. Week 4, Stafford at 5.9. And this week, it was the week of how legit are the Panthers? Like, are they really going to compete? Nope. Andy Dalton had 4.7. He was the quarterback 16 on the week. And then Deontay Johnson, who we screamed on the Sunday morning show to bench Deontay Johnson everywhere. Wide receiver 38 at 5.2. The Bears defense allows the second fewest points to quarterbacks through 5 weeks. The Chiefs and Saints haven't played tonight, but I don't think they're going to lap them. And the seventh fewest points to wide receivers at 20.5. So my point being, if you're playing players against the Bears, just be mindful. Sam Darnold's going to have 2 games against the Bears. Jordan Love is going to have 2 games against the Bears. Jared Goff is going to have 2 games against the Bears. So there are players that you could definitely bench, and like you're not going to bench Jefferson, you're not going to bench Amon-Ra, but some of those quarterbacks, I would be mindful knowing that the Bears are going to compete as a team. As a defense, they are going to be shut down to those positions.
And I just want to reinforce it because I had Dalton and I had Deontay on the all-bus team. Just to further back that up for the quarterback position, Levis week 1, QB 27, Stroud QB 16, Richardson week 3, QB 31, Stafford week 4, QB 30, and Andy Dalton, I don't know where he finished, but I know he got benched in the game. So Nick's spot on there. That was one of the ones I thought about using as a takeaway.
There you go. All right, your second takeaway.
I'm going to just run off some numbers, and then I'm going to give you the takeaway. We're going to talk about the running backs this week. So here's some of your top 20 running backs. Tank Bigsby, 1. Rico Dowdle, 3. Ramondre, after being benched. RB4. Trey Sermon.
And some credit to Nick, because Nick had Ramondre Stevenson on his all boom team before the quote even came out about the benching.
Yep, stayed on that take. Trey Sermon, RB5, Chuba Hubbard, RB7, Chase Brown, RB9, Dare Agumbawale, I had to practice that before going on the pod, RB13, Roshan Johnson, RB15, Amir Abdullah, RB16, Tyrone Tracy, great performance by the rookie. I think he had like 130 yards in the game and less than 20 carries, RB18, Cam Akers, RB20. I listed a lot of names, but here's what I got to tell you. Only 2 of the top 20 drafted running backs or 2 of the running backs drafted in the top 2 rounds finished in the top 20 this week. Only 5 running backs drafted in the top 6 rounds finished in the top 20 this week. And here's where I'm going to bring it back. This is why Nick and I endorse 0 and hero running backs. It is less than 5 weeks into the season, week 5, and it does not matter who your running backs are. I went 0 running back or hero in every single one of my leagues. On this list, played 5 of these guys in my lineups, and they outperformed some top guys. Yes, I know bye weeks came in. There's only 2 guys drafted in the top 2 rounds, Saquon and Jahmyr Gibbs, that were on bye this week. Other reliable options, Monty, Tony Pollard, sure. Guess what? Not good enough. And this is exactly why we say you can wait on that position. There's a premium for the wide receiver position in football. You look at some of the top receivers taken. Yes, Tyreek Hill is struggling because he's missing his starting quarterback. CeeDee's been great. Jefferson's been great. Amon-Ra's been great. Jamar Chase is the wide receiver 1 through 5 weeks. Those were the rest of the first-round receivers. The other ones that are injured, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson was 11 or 10. So a 10-man league, he's not a first-round pick, and he just had his best game of his season. This is why you do not need to stack the running backs early. It gives you such a limited ceiling. There are so many better pivot options, and every single running back I just gave you was not the RB1 on their team in week 1, except for Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, I mean, the top 3 on the season are Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Saquon Barkley. So the old men are running the show, but figuratively and literally. So Let me talk about a running back here. I'm going to talk about Brian Robinson, a guy that I was pretty high on coming into the draft. I think he was one of my favorite steals. Like, I just looked at his ADP of rounds 9 to 11. I said, I want him everywhere. I got him 1 out of 3 drafts. However, here's my comparison. My comparison is this year's Brian Robinson is James Conner / Jamal Williams. Through 5 games in 2024, he has 325 yards and 5 touchdowns. It's tied for the most, the touchdown number. 325 divided by 5. He's only averaging 65 yards on the ground and does not garner a lot of receptions. But the touchdown number is going to be really high. In 2021, James Conner, 752 yards on the ground, 15 touchdowns. I think he may have led the league. Jamal Williams in 2022, 1,000 yards on the ground, 1,066 actually, with 17 touchdowns. I know he led the league. My point being, I think James Robinson can help you win fantasy championships because you drafted him so late. And I think he's going to lead the league in touchdowns when it comes to running backs. I think he's going to be in the top 2 or 3. And I think he actually will end up leading the league in touchdowns with the amount of points that the Commanders are putting up every single week, and no McCaffrey to really stop him.
Yeah.
So with that kind of said, I think Brian Robinson will then end up being overdrafted next year, which is exactly what happened with both James Conner and Jamal Williams. Your third take.
I like it. So this one, I think Nick and I have kind of hammered home in pretty much every single week, I feel like, but this is another week we're just going to hammer it. It's kind of a little copy and paste, but I don't care. I'm shouting it because we've said it so much and we need to reinforce that we're right. Rookie receivers, you need to be patient on, and we're seeing it come through. Most importantly, Brian Thomas Jr., Nick and I, all over him in the offseason for the rookie we loved at their ADP. Wide receiver 8 this week, wide receiver 8 on the season, best game of his young career. And yes, it's before Monday Night Football that we record, so maybe he jumps down to 9, whatever.
Maybe not. There's not a lot of receivers playing tonight that would probably jump him. I mean,
maybe Olave, maybe Rashid.
I don't think Olave's anywhere close.
Yeah, I don't think it's happening. But
while you're talking, I'll run the numbers real quick.
Go for it. Every game this season, he has had over 9.8 points. I know, 9.8, weird number, but pretty much double digits. He's averaging 16.2 on the season. Some other rookie receivers, we're not talking about Malik Neighbors this week, but guess what? He's still ranking in the top 10 after missing a week with injury. Marvin Harrison had a rough game against one of the top secondaries in football, still had 7 targets, and we'd love him a lot more if he was drafted where normal rookie receivers get drafted. Usually, your top rookies get drafted 5th, 6th, 7th round. He was going in the 2nd round. So expectations hurt him a little bit. But the fact is, for a rookie receiver, he's having a very good fantasy season. And then we're still waiting to see on a few guys, and we're still being patient. Adunze, Worthy, Coleman, he's getting the touchdowns. He's not getting the target share we needed him to. And then McConkey. But all these guys are trending towards it. And I'm going to reiterate one of my hot takes on the season. I said that I thought rookie wide receivers were going to be the best that they've ever been, better than the 2020 class. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, most notably in that class. Those 2 guys, they might be better receivers on their career, no problem. But right now, Justin Jefferson was finished outside the top 5, and CeeDee Lamb finished outside the top 15. In the top 15 are 3 of your rookie wide receivers, and Malik Neighbors is in the top 5 as of right now.
So Olave is wide receiver 31 on the season right now. I don't think he's going to come close to cracking the top 10 tonight. Okay. You spoke about Keon Coleman and the Bills offense. I'm going to speak about the Bills offense. They cannot be trusted from a passing attack. Josh Allen is lock it, set it. I looked at James Cook's numbers. He's also lock it and set it. Every other receiver and tight end are used for great questions for the Sunday morning live show. Dalton Kincaid is tight end 7 on the year. And I know that doesn't sound too bad, but that's because Kelsey and Laporta and Andrews, they've been terrible. Kincaid only has 1 game over double-digit fantasy points. You probably spent a premium on Kincaid. You probably drafted him around 5 or 6. Probably drafted him over a Brian Thomas Jr., a Brian Robinson, a Kyler Murray. You probably drafted him over other positions that you could have used that pick on. So he's a bust. Khalil Shakir only has 1 game over 15 fantasy points. He has over double digits in all 4 of them. But that's a guy that, Stephon Diggs was the guy in Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't just not have a guy. They don't have any guys. Look at the Tampa Bay Bucks. Let me run the numbers here because I do keep Fantasy Pros open for reasons like this. Tampa Bay Bucks. Chris Godwin's wide receiver 6 on the season. Mike Evans is wide receiver 10. Let's look at some other names here. Jamar Chase right now is wide receiver 1, actually, after that ridiculous game. I know I'd have to go pretty far down the list to find T. Higgins because he dealt with the injury, but I know Higgins like averages
high in points per game,
much higher because of the the games that he hasn't played. So my point being, the fact that the Bills don't even have a guy that's even close to sniffing these numbers is a problem. And Josh Allen says it's not a problem. But guess what, Josh? That game that I saw you guys play yesterday, that looked like a problem to me. I don't know what the solution is, but the spreading the ball around that Buffalo is doing is not good for fantasy football. And the bye weeks will help with giving you a reason to play these Bills receivers. But when your roster is completely healthy, there's not a starting position for any Bill receiver. Maybe Kincaid because the position is so thin, but you're not getting the production that you thought you were going to get from Kincaid. And he's a bust, and that's just the reality of it. Your fourth takeaway.
So this one a little bit more off theme, but kind of on theme. We're going to talk a little bit about that Bengals offense. They look fantastic now. Before the season, we were worried they'd start slow with all the change in personnel between Brian Callahan, between Joe Mixon leaving the team, Tyler Boyd. Those were concerns. They did not look good week 1. And
the
since
contract holdouts as well, both Higgins
and then the holdouts from both receivers, exactly. And now they're looking like one of the best offenses in football. And it's great for fantasy. This week, Joe Burrow, QB2, Jamar Chase, wide receiver 1, T. Higgins, wide receiver 4. Got to shout myself out on the all-boom team, 2 touchdowns. Big week from Higgins. Chase Brown, RB9 on the week. I'm actually surprised. I wanted to go check back. Nick and I, neither of us had the Bengals as a top 5 offense for fantasy football. But that's because we said that the consistency was going to be an issue. They are both. This team has so much upside. Joe Burrow was a QB2 on the week. We've watched him finish outside the top 16 multiple times this season. So the consistency is not there from him. Jamar Chase is always a hit or a miss. He was colder earlier. Now he's hot. T. Higgins heating up now. Always going to be inconsistent as the wide receiver 2 on the team. But listen, Bengals are starting to come into offensive form. The defense is horrendous. One of the worst in football, if not the worst, which will lead to more shootouts, better for your fantasy team. So that's good for your fantasy football guys. But I don't know, man. Nick knows I'm a big Bengals hater. But they're coming around. They're starting to look a lot better, but they're still not winning football games. Doesn't matter.
Joey B ain't the problem. I'll say that. That defense, wow. Bad.
Yeah, that defense is
bad. And the play calling's bad. I know they tried to kick the field goal there, but they didn't give Burrow one chance to throw the ball. He had 5 touchdowns and almost 400 yards, and you run it 3 times.
Yep.
Maybe trust him. Zach Taylor, he needs to get canned. I'm on that team now. Okay. Time to talk Seahawks. And it's time to attack the Seahawks defense, especially when it comes to playing running back. Last year, the Seahawks defense allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs in 2023. We picked on them every single week. You haven't done as much this year because week 1, they got the gift of the Broncos. Then week 3, they got the gift of playing the Skylar Thompson Dolphins, which has made Devon Achane completely ineffective and unplayable. But what about the games when they actually faced elite running backs? Week 2, Ramondre Stevenson had 17 fantasy points. He was the running back 12 on the week. Week 4, faced the Lions. David Montgomery was running back 20 on the week. I know 20 didn't sound great, but he had 15 fantasy points. Week 4 was an elite week for fantasy running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs, the same week, was running back 12 with 19.8 fantasy points. This year, Tyrone Tracy, just a rookie, running back 17. I know 17 doesn't sound good. He had 14 fantasy points. He had 129 rushing yards on the ground with only 1 reception. Jordan Mason plays now on Thursday Night Football. Jordan Mason might go for 200 rushing yards. The Seahawks schedule over the next few weeks. I kind of know it off the top of my head because I know they're going to drop like the next 5, and I'm just going to be miserable and miss Pete Carroll. They have the 49ers, Jordan Mason, the Falcons, James Cook, the Rams, Kyron Williams, the 49ers, Jordan Mason, the Cardinals, James Conner, the Jets. Why am I blanking on the Jets? Breece Hall, the Cardinals, James Conner, the Packers, Josh Jacobs, the Vikings, Aaron Jones, the Bears, DeAndre Swift, and Kyron Williams with the Rams. I'm just saying the all boom team is going to be ripping on the Seahawks for the rest of this season. There is not an easy running back matchup there. So we're going to keep picking on them.
I like it.
All right. Your 5th takeaway.
So this was the week of the tight end. That's what I'm going to dub it. This was the best week for the tight end position all season and maybe in a very long time. I didn't go into the history. I didn't have the time to do it. But before Monday Night Football, where you have Travis Kelce going, who you would expect to hit this threshold, and Juwan Johnson without Taysom Hill, who could be a red zone threat, we had 15 tight ends for over 10 fantasy points, including 2 Ravens tight ends who scored 2 touchdowns. Obviously not Mark Andrews, though. But when you take a look at their position this week, you have to think to yourself, this is exactly why you don't draft a tight end early. George Kittle was the only tight end drafted in the first 8 rounds to finish in the top, to be a top 8 tight end on the season. So this is a horrendously bad season for the tight end position. It is awful, and it is why you wait on your tight end. And I would also advise this: if you have any anxiety about who your tight end is and who you should get, guess what? Trade them. If they had a good week, trade them away. Go maximize the value. Somebody thinks your tight end is going to be more consistent than the one they have. Go make the swap and play the waiver game and get some other talent. Like, it doesn't make sense to roster a top tight end because they've all been bad. They've all been bad all season, and you expect that the consistency will come. Well, it never does. It never does for the position. There is, I have Fantasy Pros up now. Let's take a look. How many tight ends are actually averaging over 10 points per game on the season? It is a grand total of 7. That's horrible. How many tight ends have over 50 fantasy points? It's 5. That means there are only 5 tight ends that have hit a roughly 10 points per week, and none of them are exploding. The highest tight end on the season, Brock Bowers, 66.5 points, 13.3 points per game. This is why you do not draft Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta in your first, second, third rounds, and why we always advise against it. And then sometimes break our rules when we don't like them.
I break that rule every single year.
Break the rule. We do. We see him on the draft board. We say, do I really want Drake London or do I want Sam Laporta on that offense? And then you kick yourself later.
Let's talk about another tight end. Let's talk about the Packers offense. And this was my complete worry with the Packers offense going into the season. It's not just inconsistent in a way. You are never going to know where the targets are going to go. Every single fantasy analyst, both of our hands up, Dontavian Wicks. You could not find. I challenge any viewer to go and find a fantasy show pre-Sunday that was telling you not to play Dontavian Wicks. I don't watch every fantasy show, but I would bet a lot of money that CBS, Fantasy Pros, fantasy footballers, Fabiano, Barry, I don't care who it was, everybody was over Dontavian Wicks.
Not only was everyone on him, everybody had him as their start of the week. He had the biggest fab dump of any player this season at the wide receiver position for the waiver wire. So you are spot on that one.
So Wicks, 2 receptions for 20 yards on 7 targets. The targets are good, but he only had 4 fantasy points. Jordan Love was fine. He was the quarterback 9 with 17. That's fine. Jacobs was running back 9 with 16.4. That's fine, not booming. Then there's Jaden Reed, who's been good this season so far, had 13.7. He's the wide receiver 20. 13's not a number that's really screaming out loud, but it's fine. And then there's Tucker Kraft, tight end 1, 24.8, 4 receptions.
Oh, boom, tight end, baby.
There you go.
There we go.
Four receptions, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 5 targets. A lot of people picked him up on their waiver wires. I think I played him in the league last year on my last week as well. But the overall point being, although this offense will be productive from an NFL standpoint and will put up a chunk of points, just like the Bills offense, who do you trust? I guess you could trust Love. I guess you could trust Jacobs because of the lack of depth for that position. But when it comes to the receivers, who do you trust? I guess you could trust Jaden Reed most weeks. But again, the Bucs have 2 receivers within the top 10. And I know not every team can have that. But the Packers, you just can't trust a guy. And that's the reality of it. And that is my point, that I'm patting myself on the back for being right about the Packers offense. I want to pat my co-host Nick on the back. I don't have all the numbers. I wish I did have the numbers here. We do are all boom and all bust team. And the reality of it is, most of the time, I think half of them. I think we're right on about half of them every week because I think it's pretty good. I'd say
our lineup is 7 players. We usually hit 4. I would say
we're probably a little bit over 50%. So let's look at the numbers here of Nick's all boom team. I do want to give him credit for this one. So 5 first off, he had Aaron Rodgers, and I hate to start off with Rodgers because it's probably the worst player on his all boom team. Quarterback 18 with 14.8 points, but that's okay. Then we go to running back. Josh Jacobs already said was your running back 9. And the all boom, all bust team isn't who's going to score the most points. It's who could you play in a flex spot or a running back 2 or a spot that you may not play the player in. So I do want to reiterate
Josh
that.
Jacobs also his best game of the season this week.
There you go. So the Jacobs' best game of the season. Like we're not going to tell you to play, Saquon Barkley on our all boom team. That's just not going to happen. Ramondre Stevenson, running back 7, his second best game of the season. His best was 18.6 week 1. He had 15.2. Let's go to receivers. I actually gave a wrong number there because I didn't have it set to PPR. So Stevenson's number was actually better.
He's the running back 4 in PPR on the week, 19.2.
Okay. Receivers. I am looking for that's why I didn't have it set to week 5. That's why the number. Okay. T. Higgins is wide receiver 4 on the week, 29.3 fantasy points. Nick gave you all the numbers last week on our Friday show about that he just obliterates the Ravens. And he did it again. Chase just did it a little bit better. But again, we're not putting Jamar Chase on the all boom team at this point. He has found his way on the all bust team before, though. Then we have Brandon Ayuk. Nick called this one as well. Wide receiver 10 on the week, 22.7 fantasy points. Then we have Brian Thomas Jr. Nick was all over this one. His best game, 22.2 fantasy points. So that's Brandon Ayuk best game, Brian Thomas best game, T. Higgins best game. So all 3 receivers that Nick picked, their best games of the season. Tucker Kraft, best game of the season. Ramondre Stevenson, second best game of the season. Josh Jacobs, best game of the season. So kudos to my co-host, who did an excellent job crafting his all boom team. And he should definitely get the flowers for that one. Nick should have ran it as a daily fantasy lineup. That's what you should have done.
I did run it as a DFS lineup.
And Rodgers killed you.
I didn't have Rodgers in it. I switched Rodgers out for
Flacco?
I forget.
Should have been Flacco.
So let me tell you, you're gonna kill me for this one. So I was looking at the budgets on the DFS lineups, and I had to make a change in my lineup based on what I liked. I had Josh Jacobs in there, and then the later guy, because Christian Watson and Dobbs weren't ruled out yet when they set the budgets, was Dontavian Wicks. So I had Jacobs, Wicks. I had Jordan Love in there, and I swapped Love out. And I had Tucker Kraft. The 2 players I chose to switch out of that were Jordan Love and Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft, if I did not swap Tucker Kraft, I swapped him for Zach Ertz because he was the only guy under him that I really liked budget-wise. If I made $0 on it for as good of a week as I had on the all boom team, if I didn't make that switch for Tucker Kraft and the QB switch, I would have made like $20 and finished in like the top. It was a $3 buy-in. I would have finished in the top 1,000 of a 500,000 person pool.
If you had played Tucker Kraft and like Flacco, you probably would have had a really, really solid week. We told somebody to play Flacco. We told
everybody. There was someone, and
there was a question on. Yeah, there's a question on the Sunday Live, and they were asking if Trevor Lawrence is a good play in DFS.
It was
and we said Trevor's fine.
Flacco.
Yeah, Flacco was right under him, and we both said play Flacco. He finishes the quarterback 4 of the week with 26.6 fantasy points, about 4 more than Trevor.
Yep.
And we don't do a lot of daily fantasy, but we're 1 for 1 on daily fantasy takes on the season, so we'll take that.
We're on it. We're on it.
That is our top 5 takeaways each. That is our first show of the week to get you ready for week 6. If you enjoyed the show and you're a first-time listener, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and drop a like on this video and any video that you do watch in the future. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, we appreciate you. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, make sure you're subscribed and then give us a 5-star rating and a review. We would very much appreciate that. We're all over social media. Instagram is Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Twitter is Primetime FF Pod. If you have any questions during the week, we're happy to answer them. Next time you hear from us will be Friday for our all boom and all bust teams. Hopefully I'm giving you an all boom and all bust team. We'll figure that out. Then our live show Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you guys for your support and for listening to this show. Make sure to set those waiver wires before 3 a.m. and we'll talk to you guys later this week.